that's it. This place is closing, and it's a weird feeling. It's the only way to describe it. Is a weird feeling.
Yeah, it goes from like, there's 12 guys left on the field, and there's 8, then there's 6, and it's like, oh my God, it's getting closer and closer. And I think the guy who really symbolized it for me was Jerry Koosman, because Jerry Koosman started the first game I ever went to in 1973, and I went back and counted about 6 or 7 guys who played in the very first game I ever went to were there that day. And it did my heart good to realize that, one of the points I make in the book is, for a lot of us, because the Mets are an expansion team born in the same era that a lot of its fans were born, our life mirrors the life of the franchise, and to be able to bring back so many guys who constitute the history of the franchise. Obviously a few guys unfortunately are no longer with us, but it's a mirror of our lives, and these guys were the living proof of it. And it was beautifully done. I know there was some criticism. How could the Mets do this, after the game when, this possibility existed? And, look, they were going to lose either way if they were going to lose. It's hard to say, send Mike Piazza and Tom Seaver out through the center field fence, play, In My Life by the Beatles, and then send Oliver Perez to the mound to warm up. I mean, it just wouldn't have worked, so... It was at once, the closing was an uplifting if sad moment. The game itself was obviously a terrible moment. Although I have to say, after surviving Tom Glavine in the 1/3 of an inning, I can handle anything at this point.
I'm sure. Now, you mentioned some of those mid-'70s. Now, we've had a couple of those guys on the show. I had Skip Lockwood on in the spring. We just had, earlier in the night, Pat Zachary on the show. So, you have any memories to share about Pat Zachary, considering that, I got to tell the story. I'll tell you, I just cold. I found Pat Zachary. I just cold the guy. And I found him, and he answered the phone, like, hey, would you like to come on the show? And he's like, sure. And, it's kind of strange because you don't really hear from him a lot. So, any chance that you have any idea, any stories about Pat Zachary that stand out?
I remember Pat Zachary being an untenable position because he was the pitcher who was taking Tom Seaver's place in the rotation, when, of course, you could never take Tom Seaver's place in general. And it was tough to watch somebody put on a Mets uniform. I think it was appropriate that his number was 1 number lower than Seaver's. It was tough to watch somebody who you knew was pitching only because Tom Seaver had been traded. And I really came to like Doug Flynn a lot. Steve Henderson was one of my favorites. Both of those came in the trade. I never really held it against them. I don't hold anything personally against Pat Zachary. He just sort of represented, where the franchise, lowercase franchise, as opposed to uppercase Tom Seaver, the franchise, was headed at that point. But I remember specifically, I think it was like a 10-3 start in 1978, made the All-Star team. While Ron Guidry was across town, also getting off to a great start. Sure. I think the first thing I ever wrote for publication for my local paper was, look, we have two great pitchers in New York, Ron Guidry and Pat Zachary, which sort of had a very short shelf life from the time I wrote it to the time Pat Zachary, I think, didn't he kick a step in the dugout?
He broke his foot.
And that was kind of, he would have the occasional good start until he left. But, he was, all those guys, that they were, again, the untenable positions, being a Met in the late 70s and the early 80s. But the great thing about those teams, and even the teams in the early 90s and the early 2000s after they kind of went downhill, is you really appreciate the wins from those eras. I mean, you appreciate the wins obviously when the Mets are winning a pennant or something, but the good times really stick out if you're a loyal fan. And, the one game I always come back to from the Pat Zachary era, if we want to call it that, was, the June 14th, 1980, the night Steve Henderson hits that home run to beat the Giants 7-6 after they were down 6-0 at one point. And, it's just amazing when you talk to people who have taken it as seriously as you do, and you just sort of drop the name, Steve Henderson. and suddenly, oh, you know that game? Remember that game? It was 1980, and they came. And it just amazes me that after 28 years, that you still get that sort of reaction. And you could fill in the blank with some other game from some other year when some other player was involved. And that's just sort of, again, I think that's what that final day symbolized to me. That they're just this long running, bloodstream, if you will, that goes from the time you discover a team as a fan when you're a kid to right up to the very last moment that you saw them play. I mean, when I watched the players be introduced, went through Jack Fisher and Ron Hunt and Frank Thomas and Al Jackson, none of whom I saw play for the Mets. And the first guy I actually had seen was Jim McAndrew, and I was all excited, like, hey, Jim McAndrew, that's my year. And then they, like I said, they get to later in the 70s, they bring out guys like Dave Kingman, hey, that's my era too, and Tim Tuffle, that's my era. And I realized, like, it's all my era.
Yep.
Today was my era, just like the Piazza was and Seaver was. So that's the good thing about remaining a fan, and I hope comes through in the book, is that you never really lose that sense of what it means to you. Sometimes you're going to be disappointed. Some years, you're going to finish last, but you stick with it. It's its own reward. And otherwise you just what would you be doing 6 months out of the year, except I don't know, maybe getting on with your life? Why would we want to do that when we have baseball?
No, for sure. And for those fans, as I wrap up here, for those fans, in case they're listening and they click on the player of the show, there's a pre-order. It'll take you to Amazon. That's the one of the neat things about Blog Talk Radio. They'll let you embed a book when the author is on. So if you go to Amazon, it'll be a pre-order of Greg's book. And Greg, why don't you just let everybody know the details? And I know there's other places. I think Barnes and Noble is going to have it. So here's your chance. I know it's still early, and we'll probably be talking again before the book is released. But whet their appetite. Let them know where they're going to be able to get this book.
Sure. Well, folks should be able to order the book from any major online bookseller. I know it's already, like I said, on Amazon and on BarnesandNoble.com. It is due out sometime in spring training, sometime after pitchers and catchers, or right around the time they're reporting. Maybe something to read if you're not necessarily enthralled by the World Baseball Classic. It should be in certainly in the New York area in brick and mortar bookstores. From Skyhorse Publishing. They published Mets by the Numbers last year, and I know I was very encouraged to see that in stores everywhere. So hopefully Faith and Fear in Flushing will be wherever fine books are sold. But yeah, feel free to pre-order it on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, and keep reading Faith and Fear in Flushing, the blog, because we'll have more information on that, as well as keeping you company if you're a Mets fan throughout the winter.
Well, hey, Greg, nice having you on. There will be no jinx today. I can assure you that our conversation will not lead to a collapse this time around.
Yeah, the Jets already won 47-3 today. I think this is nothing but good luck talking to you during November.
We just got to stay away from each other in September. That's it.
I guess that's the problem.
Hey, Greg, enjoy yourself. We'll talk, and good luck with the writing of the rest of the book. And I'm sure when it is released, we'll have another chat. So good stuff, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Mike.
No problem. That's Greg Prince.